Have you ever created a profile for something, and when you get to the terms and conditions, you're left wondering,
Do I even know what I'm signing? What if I just got back from a party and I'm inebriated as flip? What if I'm just old or have dementia?
these are all examples of contract law and contracts, and as Cornell Law School states, these are simply agreements between parties that create mutual obligation that are enforced by law.
According to Thomas Reuters, a contract needs to follow similar structure. Think OACL: offer, acceptance, awareness, consideration, capacity, and legality. The first step here is an offer. Essentially, someone's offering something in return for something else. For example, a coffee shop has coffee and buyers want coffee. The coffee shop wants money, so they make an exchange where the coffee shop makes money and the buyer gets coffee.
The next part of an offer is acceptance. Acceptance is where the consumer decides whether or not they actually want to accept the offer. Sometimes there will be a counter offer where they try to negotiate, but this is the step where they accept an agreement on what goods and products are being exchanged.
The next step here is awareness, and that looks like both parties understanding what exactly is going on in the contract terms. Both parties know that they're getting something in return for what they're providing.
Similar to acceptance, consideration is a point where people actually decide if they want to follow through with the contract or not. This is where they're literally just considering whether or not they agree to the terms, whether or not they agree to the trade, and if it's going to happen. And now we're to the heart of the acronym, contractual capacity. This is what we're going to be spending most of the video on because it has such a significance.
In its entirety, capacity essentially allows members to not sign their life away. Humans have obligations and rights, and contracts can't void that.
Yeah, and a lot of times there are people who don't fully understand the consequences or the validity of contracts. Those examples are minors, people who are under the age of 18 who don't have a fully developed brain, or maybe even someone with a brain disorder like dementia who is having trouble remembering certain parts of the contract or can't fully comprehend that. Even somebody under the influence of alcohol or drugs where they're in a literal altered state. These are all examples of where contract capacity can be minimized.
Yeah, it's examples like these where it can seem unfair when signing a contract, and we'll talk about the actual outcomes of that later.
And the last part is legality. It's pretty obvious you can't sign a contract when things that are illegal. A good example about this is Patel versus Mirza. Patel offered this guy named Mirza who had insider information a large sum of money to basically do illegal activities and gain him more money because he had insider information. But as that all crumbled, Mirza tried to keep all the money even though the contract was illegal. At the end, Patel ended up getting it all back, but that's just an example of how contracts have to have legality.
Side note, under circumstances where there's drugs or even the cartel, contracts can't exist.
When it comes to contract law and capacity, one of the first examples that comes to mind are minors. People under the age of 18, because they're not legally considered adults yet, often lack capacity to sign most contracts, and even the contracts that they do sign can oftentimes be considered voidable. A great example of this is the case of Dotson versus Schrader. Nice to meet you, son. I'm Schrader. This is Schrader of Schrader Auto Sales, a small town auto sale shop. How's it going?
Nice to meet you, Trader. I'm Dotson.
And this is Joseph Dotson, a young teenager who's looking for his first vehicle.
I saw you got that truck out in the lot. I really like it.
Yeah, son, she runs great, got low mileage. What you thinking? Do you want it?
I mean, of course I want it. How much though?
I mean, if you could do $4,900, I think we got a deal.
Looks like we have a deal!
Sadly, these applause won't be long-lived. Your buddy right there, the one who you just signed that contract with, he's only 16 years old. We'll get to why that's important in a little bit. Alright, smile! Yeah, enjoy this moment, Jason, because it only gets crazier from here.
Ugh. What? Come on, this truck's done for. I can't even repair this. Schrader, this truck is a mess. I don't even know what I was getting myself into. You know I'm a minor, right?
Yeah, but that doesn't mean you just get a free truck.
But the law says I'm a minor. I can void this contract anytime I want.
We're gonna bring it to court.
I guess we will.
And the court has ruled you need to pay him back, and then you need to pay the damages.
Serious? Oh my gosh.
So, what did we learn here? The child in the situation lacked capacity to sign the contract in the first place, which eventually gives him opportunity to void the contract. This doesn't mean he gets a full ride in return of the truck. He just gets to void the original contract, paying back damages that he caused to the truck.
You know, another great example of contract law is social media regulations. You see, children below the age of 13 aren't able to sign up for social media platforms or create profiles on them, but you have children or siblings most likely who have done this. We've all seen it where someone below the age of 13 just scrolls a little bit further down on their birthday to sign up for platforms, and that's an example of a voidable contract. It's simple things like this where minors actually have the benefit in the scenario because they lack capacity. So that basically covers it when it comes to minors and contract law.
What about drunk people?
And you see, this is where things get complicated because it's not like when somebody has one drink, the contract is immediately voidable. You can't, after having one beer, say, I didn't mean to take out a car loan. That's not how contract law and intoxication works.
Yeah, essentially, capacity, it doesn't only affect minors. It's the ability to make a cognitive decision, signing off whatever you're planning on signing. It's the ability to make a right-minded choice.
And it's a mutual agreement between both parties. And when someone's under the influence, people can recognize that that's a point to take advantage of. So making sure both sides are in a clear state of mind is very big in contracts. And a great example of this is Lucy versus Zemmer. Alright, so this next case is honestly one of the funniest and most important stories in contract law. It's called Lucy versus Zemmer, and it started in Virginia back in 1952. There's this guy, W.O. Lucy, who had been trying to buy the biggest piece of land, the Ferguson farm, from a man named A.H. Zemmer for years. This wasn't a one-time thing. Lucy had been after this property for almost a decade, and every single time, Zemmer said no. Fast forward to one December night years later, the two of them end up at a restaurant together. It's a small town spot, and they start drinking. They're having a good time, they probably get a little buzzed, and Lucy decides to bring it up again. So, are you finally ready to sell me that farm? Zemmer laughs it off at first, but Lucy keeps pressing. They actually start talking numbers and details, and Lucy offers $50,000, which back then was a lot of money. So Zemmer grabs the scrap of paper, and right there in the restaurant, he writes out, "We hereby agree to sell to W.O. Lucy the Ferguson farm for $50,000, title satisfactory to buyer." See, Zemmer really thought he was joking in this instance, but here he is, he signs it. Then he has his wife, Ida, sign it too, but here's where it gets weird. Right before she signs, Zemmer whispers to her, don't worry, this is just a joke, but Lucy doesn't hear that part from his perspective. This is 100% real. The next day, Lucy's all business. He tells his brother, "Hey, I bought the Ferguson farm last night." His brother's like, "No way," but Lucy says, "Yeah, it's in writing, I've got it right here." They even agreed to split ownership, and his brother agreed to put $25,000 in for half of it. So he hired a lawyer to run a title search, which is basically checking that the property ownership is clean and everything was checks out. He goes to Zemmer to close the deal. Zemmer backtracks and says, "Hold on, this was a joke. We were both drunk and I wasn't serious." Lucy really wasn't having it. The first trial court, actually took Zemmer's side. They said, "Yeah, sounds like some bar talk there went too far," but Lucy appealed it to the Virginia Supreme Court, and that's where it gets really interesting. Does a contract depend on when someone meant in their head or on what they did and said in that moment? The court said, look, the law doesn't care what you secretly mean, it cares about what a reasonable person would think based on your actions. And Zimmer's actions look serious. He spent 40 minutes talking about the sale, wrote an agreement, got his wife to sign, included legal language about the title, and signed it himself. Nothing about that screamed joke. The whole "we were drunk" thing didn't uphold either. Witnesses said Zimmer wasn't actually that drunk. He remembered everything, spoke clearly, and could negotiate. So yeah, he'd been drinking, but he still knew what he was doing. The court ended up siding with Lucy and forced Zephyr to go through with the sale, meaning the farm had actually been sold for $50,000. The big takeaway here is that intent in contract law isn't about what's going on inside your head, it's about what your actions show to the outside world. It's instances like this that show us that contracts that are signed, even while people are intoxicated, can still be legally binding, and the participants of the contract might be in for a rude awakening once they sober up. So what did we learn from this example? We learned in this case that it doesn't matter about intoxication, it matters really about how it looks. These are two people who are obviously above the age of 18 making a contract and negotiation. And it didn't matter, as he tried to argue about him being intoxicated or that he was just joking. It mattered that he was able to haggle and still negotiate, so the contract still held its validity. So, note to self, first off, Zephyr got. And also, don't mix whiskey and legally binding signatures.
So, from what we've seen, both being a minor or being a drunkard can impact your capacity to sign a contract. These aren't the only two areas where contracts can become voided or vague. You could look at dementia or cognitive impairment. These are both two things that can impact a contract's voidability or capacity.
All right, Grady, so we're talking about mental capacity. We're talking about examples of this in contract law. And I know you've talked about it with a specific case, but I'm not super aware of the case. So what is the case you're talking about?
Yeah, so that case is Hauer versus Union.
Okay.
Essentially, in this case, Hauer, an older woman who was just in a motorcycle accident, she needed brain surgery, and so she was appointed essentially a guardian to help her make decisions. Eventually, he ended up saying, "You're fine enough to make your own decisions. Your brain is capable enough." He went away. While Hauer was out living her own life, she ran into this guy named Ben.
Okay.
Ben was a young entrepreneur. He wanted to start his own business. He's kind of down in the dumps, wanted to start something new. He needed her loans to start his business.
Mm-hmm.
So Ben and Hauer go to Union Bank. Hauer makes that decision to take a loan to help out Ben. Essentially, Hauer comes up to say, "I'm not mentally capable to make this decision, seeing as my brain surgery hasn't entirely come back to full sense." Eventually, she ended up winning the case against Union. She had to pay off.
I think the way you described it to me, it was she paid mutual funds to the bank in exchange for the loan.
Yeah.
Then the bank had to pay it back. But then from that point,
Hauer would have broken even.
Yeah.
Ben is just, this dude
Ben is thriving.
just making cash.
Ben is thriving. Okay, so with that considered, do we think a contract can be voidable when one person lacks mental capacity?
In this situation, I would say it kind of depends,
Mm-hmm.
because she had a guardian.
Mm-hmm.
He said she was all right.
The physician ruled that she didn't need that guardian.
You can make your own decisions.
Yeah.
I would say the court ruled correctly in this case, seeing as she did have a brain surgery.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she's an older woman put in kind of an unfortunate circumstance. I think that they ruled correctly. I think it could be twisted depending on the parties involved.
Mm-hmm.
I think for this case, it probably was the correct choice.
Mm-hmm. I think I would agree, because considering she didn't have that guardian with her anymore, it makes it so much more difficult. Now, if she had the guardian and she still made that decision, then, or the guardian didn't intervene, I think it would have been a very different situation if the guardian was still there. But the guardian was there, then it would have resulted in a further like understanding of what she was actually doing. Probably the guardian would have recognized, hey, let's not give money to this young guy who's already on a losing streak. Let's spend our money wisely and be able to get her back on the right track. I can definitely agree that the court ruled correctly because she didn't have the like cognitive development to make those decisions in a sound state of mind. And that's at the root of it what capacity is. You know, we talked about it with intoxication, we talked about it with minors. These are all extreme circumstances of when people have impairments or things that can keep them from fully understanding contracts to the extent that they need to be.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right, so Caden, based on this case, we could ask, where do the boundaries lie with mental capacity? Capacity doesn't necessarily can affect how someone feels always. It's two parties involved. In a high temperament society, how can someone question whether they have the capacity to sign a contract with all the self-diagnosis that we have these days?
Yeah, that's a good question, Grady. I really think you just hit the nail on the head with it because, like you're saying, it's not about feelings. It's about whether both parties mutually understand the terms of the agreement that they're making. For example, somebody with anxiety, although their condition does affect them and it may make the decision that they're making more stress intensive or more difficult to make, they still have the capacity to acknowledge the decision that's being made and are able to agree upon the terms. And if you look at the restatement, 2nd of Contracts 15, it says a person incurs only voidable contractual duties if by reason of mental illness or defect they are unable to understand the nature and consequence of the transactions, meaning only the people who aren't fully able to understand the entity that is the contract. Just like when it comes to intoxication, just like when it comes to minors, it's only voidable when it comes to people who don't fully understand the obligations of the contract.
Absolutely, Caden. So where do you think self-diagnosis could lie in this case?
Yeah, I think it's really difficult to assess when it comes to self-diagnosis because I think there is validity behind a lot of self-diagnosis cases out there today because there is a rise of mental health. Like there's a mental health crisis right now and we can be aware of that. That's where it gets tricky. It doesn't automatically mean that you lack capacity because of self-diagnosis. Courts, they look at evidence and not labels. The law, as it says here, use an objective standard, meaning it looks at your actions and how you behave during the agreement, not just what you say after. So that's like a kind of overview of when it comes to self-diagnosis. It's really particular, but it really comes down to capacity.
So how can people protect themselves based on their own mental capacities? I mean, if we're not really sure sometimes whether we're capable or not, what can we do to kind of just protect ourselves and make sure that we are signing these documents properly?
I think the biggest things when it comes to being valid in the mental capacity realm are documentation. Because if it gets documented, or however the word is, as long as it's written down by a medical professional or someone who's in that professional field, then it's really hard to argue with proper documentation. Another thing is involve a trusted third party. If we look at the case that we just analyzed, Howard had a guardian who could have helped her out a lot in the circumstance, but they ended up being released because she was deemed differently. So if the guardian had stayed around, who knew the outcome that could have came from it?
Probably would have been better.
Yeah, it would have been, I think it would have been a lot better. If not, it would have been avoided entirely.
Exactly.
You know, so involving a trusted third party, making sure there's a guardian that is present to be there to support the means of the contract to make sure both sides fully understand it. If you're unsure about mental capacity, I think those are two really good places to start.
Absolutely. Okay, so far we've talked about minors buying trucks and farmers selling their land when they're drunk. We've also talked about mental incapacity and how it can affect the capacity of a contract. One thing that we haven't touched on yet is the idea of the new online signing I acknowledge kind of things that you see on apps or websites.
So your 13-year-old cousin who just downloaded social media and clicked I agree to the terms and services, that's a contract. Or your 15-year-old friend who faked their birthday so they could play the new GTA game, that's another example of an I agree statement, which is still considered a contractual obligation. CNIL even goes on to talk about how young people and minors create the majority of our social networks today, and every time they click I agree, that holds just as much power as a handwritten signature. So making sure people who are minors or who struggle with different capacities are aware of the validity of the agreement statements is really, really important. So, what do we learn? We learned that when it comes to contract law, it can be really confusing. When it comes to people under the age of 18, people who are drunk, selling their farms on napkins, or when it comes to people who lack mental capacity, it's all about understanding. It's all about making sure both parties or all parties understand the agreements that they're signing, and just like the 6 or 7 steps we talked about at the beginning, that all of those requirements are met for a contract to take place.
So, next time you click I agree, or sign a lease, or sell a goat drunk, remember that the law might not always let you take it back. Anyway, thanks for watching this little informational video. Tune in for the next one.
We hope you enjoy.